The LA Kings get ready for a rematch against the top team in the West. That and the latest trade deadline rumors on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Well, the LA Kings play game 2 of their 5-game homestand tonight with a rematch against the top team in the Western Conference, the Vancouver Canucks. The Kings posted a convincing win in Vancouver last Thursday by a score of 5-1. Kings come into tonight's game with a record of 31-19-10, 4th place in the Pacific Division, 7th in the Western Conference, and 12th in the NHL with 72 points. Kings are 12-10-6 on home ice this season, coming off a 5-1 home win over the New Jersey Devils on Sunday afternoon. The Vancouver Canucks are 39-17-7, 1st place in the Pacific Division, 1st in the Western Conference, and 3rd in the NHL with 85 points. The Canucks led the NHL in points for most of the season, but they are currently 3 points behind the Florida Panthers and 1 point behind the Boston Bruins for the top record in the NHL. Canucks are 19-11-4 on the road this season, coming off a 2-1 road win over the Ducks in Anaheim this past Sunday. Kings are 18th in the NHL in goals scored per game, 3.10. Canucks are 4th in the NHL in goals scored per game, 3.56. LA is 3rd in the NHL in allowing goals per game, 2.62. Vancouver 7th in the league, allowing goals at 2.76. The Kings are tied for 9th in the NHL on the power play at 22.8%. They're tied with the Vancouver Canucks, who are also at 22.8%. with the man advantage. The Kings actually no longer the number one team in the NHL on the penalty kill. They have slipped behind the Philadelphia Flyers. LA 2nd in the league on the PK at 86.2%. Philadelphia is at 86.5%. Vancouver 20th in the NHL on the penalty kill, 78.8%. Individually, the Kings are led in points by Kevin Fiala, who has 55 points, 19 goals, and 36 assists. Last 7 games for Fiala, he's got 5 goals and 11 points. Trevor Moore leads the team in goals with 23 after going 12 straight games without a goal. Moore does have 2 goals in his last 4 games, so maybe getting a bit on track, we hope. For the Canucks, JT Miller leads their team with 83 points. That's tied for 6th in the NHL. Brock Besser leads Vancouver in goals with 35. That's tied for 7th in the National Hockey League. As for the 2 netminders, the Kings are expected to go with Cam Talbot. He is 18, 14, and 5, 2.46 goals against average, and a .916 save percentage on the season with 1 shutout. His last game was Sunday against the Devils when he allowed 1 goal on 31 shots. He was in net against the Canucks last Thursday when he got the victory, 1 goal allowed on 24 shots. The Canucks will go with Thatcher Demko in net. He is 31, 13, and 2, a 2.55 goals against average, and a .914 save percentage. His 31 wins are tied for most in the NHL with Florida's Sergei Bobrovsky. His last start was against the Kings last Thursday, took the loss, allowing 5 goals on 20 shots against. This is the second of 4 matchups between the Kings and the Canucks. They'll meet again on March the 25th in Vancouver, and one final time in the regular season in Los Angeles on April the 6th. Let's check out the Kings' projected lineup for tonight's game. As expected, or I should say it is expected, that head coach Jim Hiller is going to stick with that 11 forward, 7 defenseman lineup that he has had for the last 2 games, both decisive victories. So Arthur Kaliev will be the one healthy scratch. Andrei Kopitar centering the top line with Quinton Byfield and Alex Turcotte. Philip Deneau, who's coming off the hat trick, centering the second line with the red-hot Kevin Fiala and Trevor Moore. The third line, P.L. Dubois with Jared Anderson-Dolan and Alex Laferriere. And then the 2 forwards on the fourth line, Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis, and then a rotation of forwards taking up that third forward spot. Guys like Quinton Byfield, Kevin Fiala, Philip Deneau, all getting some extra ice time, and they seem to be enjoying it based on their performances of late. As for the defensive pairings, you're going to have Drew Doughty with Jacob Moverara. You've got Matt Roy with Vladislav Gavrikov and Andreas Englund with Jordan Spence and Brandt Clark rotating in and out of the lineup. So you're also getting the 2 young defensemen, Brandt Clark and Jordan Spence, both in games at the same time. Now they are getting less minutes than they would had they not been in the lineup together, but we've seen that platoon situation, and so far it seems to be working better to have them both in the lineup, both getting ice time as the games go along. So that's the projected lineup, and of course Cam Talbot in net we're expecting against the Vancouver Canucks. As I mentioned, Kings have won 2 in a row and have looked good in both of those victories. They've outscored their opponents 10-2 in those 2 wins. The Kings also getting production from a lot of different players, 7 different players scoring those 10 goals for the LA Kings over those last 2 games. The Canucks, meanwhile, are going through probably their roughest stretch of the season. They've got only 2 wins in their last 8 games, and one of them was a game that they squeaked out against the lowly Anaheim Ducks in their last game. We have mentioned this before, but this could be a possible first-round playoff matchup. That would see the Kings finish as the number 2 wildcard team in the Western Conference. Now, they're right now tied with Nashville for one of the 2 wildcard spots, but currently hold the tiebreaker. They've got games in hand on the Predators, but Nashville is red hot right now. Also, Vancouver, for the Kings to match up with them in the first round, would need to finish as the number 1 seed in the West. Now, they've been there for most of the season, so it's not certainly out of the realm of possibility to think they're going to finish there, but that's certainly not set in stone. Canucks right now just a 2-point lead over Winnipeg and Dallas, who are tied for the Central Division lead. Plenty of ifs as far as who the Kings could meet up in the playoffs, but Vancouver is on the list for sure. So is there any new injury news for the LA Kings, and could the Kings be looking to add some physicality at the trade deadline? We'll talk about that and more next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. We are in the stretch run of the NHL season, and the Kings are looking to make a playoff push, but regardless of where the Kings are in the standings, you need to know that you could win big playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL networks. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether players like Austin Matthews or Nathan McKinnon will record more or less based on Sleeper's projections for things like goals, assists, plus minus, and of course there's goalies you can pick as well. Talk about saves, and it's not just about the NHL. You can also play daily fantasy with the NBA. To win 100 times, bet on Sleeper. You need to correctly pick the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Kings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention, nail your picks, and you could win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's the code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availabilities. Hey, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. So the big question we will continue to ask until we have a definitive answer: is there any official word from the LA Kings on the health of injured players Adrian Kempe, Victor Arvidsson, Mikey Anderson, and Carl Grundstrom? The answer for today, so far here on this Tuesday afternoon, is unfortunately nothing new to report. So for now, we'll continue to hold on to the hope that has been offered by John Hoven and the guys over at mayorsmanor.com and the Kings of the podcast, who are reporting that Kempe, Arvidsson, and Anderson are all expected to be available before the end of the season, or at least be ready for the start of the playoffs. Kempe and Anderson reportedly a few weeks away, and Arvidsson maybe a little more than a few weeks away. So what is the latest scuttlebutt on potential moves ahead of the NHL trade deadline for the LA Kings, which is coming up this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time? I saw that Boston Hockey Now reported the Kings have interest in Bruins goalie Linus Ullmark. Now, we mentioned him on Monday's show when we talked about some of the goaltenders that could still be available for the LA Kings. Boston Hockey Now quoted an unnamed executive source saying that the Kings are interested. I assume it's a Bruins source. They didn't say, they just said unnamed executive source for what that's worth. I still think it's a long shot for the Kings to get Linus Ullmark, but we'll see. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with Linus Ullmark, he won the Vezina Trophy last year as the league's top goaltender. Now, why would the Bruins be looking to move that guy? Well, they have a very solid tandem in net. Jeremy Swayman is the younger of the two goaltenders, and he has better numbers this season than Ullmark. Swayman's got 20 wins, Ullmark 16. Swayman has a 2.49 goals against average to Ullmark's 2.80, and Swayman has a 921 save percentage to Ullmark's 910. So the Bruins are thinking about Stanley Cup. They've been one of the top teams in the NHL, but they've shown some cracks lately. They do have other areas in their lineup to shore up, and they could see having two good goaltenders as being a luxury rather than a necessity. And so they would look to move Ullmark. Also, Jeremy Swayman apparently is somebody they're going to need to re-sign in the near future. And so they are going to need money for that as well. So having the luxury of those two goalies is something that they're probably not going to be able to have in the near future. So maybe they're looking to make a move at this point. That said, Boston is obviously looking for something in return that can help them win now. They're not really interested in prospects or first-round draft picks. So what do the Kings have that's available that could help a team win now? And that, of course, would have to include defenseman Matt Roy and who knows what else. Also, Ullmark has a 16-team no-trade clause. Now, LA usually doesn't end up on those types of lists, but who knows what his list might actually be, and who knows if he'd be willing to waive that potentially to go somewhere else. So it's out there that Linus Ullmark apparently has drawn interest from the Kings, and the New Jersey Devils are in the mix for any goalie that's been talked about as well. But we shall see. It is an intriguing idea to have last year's Vezina Trophy winner in net for the LA Kings. Now, we've talked a bit about the Kings adding a forward. Arthur Kallio possibly on his way out. Tyler Toffoli's name has been mentioned. I think that's a lot of nostalgia, to be honest. I don't really see that as something that's likely going to happen. And you can argue it's not really something the Kings need. While adding a Tyler Toffoli certainly would be beneficial to any team. If the Kings are going to have Adrian Kempe and Victor Arvidsson back, you would think that they've got enough firepower up front. But what about adding a physical bottom six forward? This is something I know a lot of Kings fans have talked about, being a little bit more of a team that's harder to play against, having that grit, having that sandpaper, especially in playoff hockey. Well, friend of the show, Austin Stanovich of the Hockey News, who is scheduled to be our guest on this Thursday's show to talk about trade deadline stuff and all things LA Kings. He posted an article today. I reposted it if you follow the Locked on LA Kings X or Twitter account. So go check that out if you do. But he mentioned a few candidates for the LA Kings to add as a bottom six forward who could bring kind of that more physical element. The three players he mentioned were Nashville's Yakov Trenin, Buffalo's Jordan Greenway, who you might be familiar with more with the Minnesota Wild, and speaking of Minnesota, Brandon Duhaime. All physical forwards, all apparently are available. The Kings could always use a power forward type to go hard to the net. Perhaps somebody, say, like a Carl Grundstrom, who seems to be of the injured players for the Kings, maybe a little bit more murky as far as his return. We have heard that he has been seen wearing a walking boot. So that's something, obviously lower body injury, ankle, foot, something along those lines. But we haven't had a whole lot of news on him otherwise. So maybe he's not going to be able to return. We don't know, but maybe the Kings are looking to, again, upgrade on that side of things as well. It's an interesting possibility. How about the Kings adding on defense? Now, Mikey Anderson's status is clearly a key here. Now, he is expected back in a couple of weeks. Regardless, the Kings could look to add another defenseman to strengthen a strong group of blue liners. The most interesting name out there is a name that Kings fans should be very familiar with, and that would be Jakob Chychrun. Now, wait a minute. He was just acquired before this season by the rebuilding Ottawa Senators. He's 25 years old. Why in the world would Ottawa be looking to trade him? Good question. I don't know either, but there are multiple reports that say that Chychrun, a left side defenseman, is available. Now, you probably recall the Kings had reportedly been interested in Chychrun last year when he was in Arizona, and many Kings fans were hot and heavy to get him. Interesting that Kings GM Rob Blake saw an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone and instead made a deal with Columbus for Vladislav Gavrikov and goalie Jonas Korpisalo. So Chychrun ended up in Ottawa. Again, 25 years old, 1 year left on his deal that pays him $4.6 million. In 59 games this season, he has posted 9 goals and 31 points. Would be a nice addition for any team. But because he is under contract for another year, no urgency for the Senators to deal him. They can hold on to Chychrun, looking for the best possible deal. If they don't get it, they can hold on to him, trade him in the offseason or next year at the deadline if they are really that interested in unloading him. As for other left-handed defensemen that are out there that the LA Kings could be looking at, well, the biggest name is Noah Hanifin from the Calgary Flames, but he's one of the top players that it's out there available, and he's going to get a lot of interest. And there's other teams that are probably willing to pay a lot more than the Kings can. So I think he's definitely out of the Kings league. There's Nick Seeler of the Philadelphia Flyers and Joel Edmondson of the Washington Capitals. They're both left shot defensemen, reportedly available, and would be an upgrade over Andreas Englund, who I think has played much better than I certainly expected this season. Although I did see a report this morning that the Flyers are possibly looking to re-sign Seeler, so potentially scratch him off the list. So that only leaves 3 left-hand shot defensemen of note available for the Kings. Like I said, I don't see Noah Hanifin being somebody that the Kings could go out and get. I think Chychrun is also a bit of a long shot. So maybe Joel Edmondson, who I believe won a Stanley Cup recently with the St. Louis Blues, could be a very nice third pairing defenseman on the left side and maybe could come at a reasonable price. So if you can upgrade at that position, why not look to do it? Maybe the Kings are. We shall have to wait and see. Well, we had one team fail to put some distance between them and the Kings in the Pacific Division standings, and another team gain ground on the Kings in the wild card race. We will talk about that and more next here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, eBay will always get you exactly what you are looking for or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. The LA Kings face the Vancouver Canucks, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time tonight. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Well, the Kings have 22 games left in the regular season. They have the third easiest remaining schedule, according to Takeathon.com. It includes 3 games against the worst team in the NHL, the Chicago Blackhawks. They've got 2 games against the third worst team in the league. That would be the Anaheim Ducks, and a game against the second worst team in the league in the San Jose Sharks. So a favorable schedule for the LA Kings the rest of the way. Is if you're looking to see if they're going to be able to hold on to a wild card spot, I've said all along, I think the Kings are definitely going to be a wild card team. Possible they could be the third team in the Pacific Division, but I think it is very, very reasonable for Kings fans to make their plans to see some playoff hockey at Crypto.com Arena this season. Let's check, though, the standings in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race. We'll start with the Edmonton Oilers, who have 76 points. They are second in the Pacific Division. They did not play last night. They're playing against the Boston Bruins tonight, so a tough game tonight for Edmonton. Then you've got Vegas, now third in the Pacific, 73 points. They lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets last night, 6-3. Vegas is reeling a little bit. And LA, if that continues, the Kings moving up and getting that third spot, looking more and more like a possibility. And also, I'm looking for Vegas to do something big at the trade deadline because they need something to kind of jumpstart their team. They are getting Jack Eichel back, their top offensive player from injury, but their captain, Mark Stone, they're saying is going to be out to the playoffs. We've certainly heard that before and potentially longer. We'll see about that. But Vegas is scuffling right now, and they're looking to do something, I think, big at the deadline to help themselves out. We shall see. But the Kings, again, just 1 point back of Vegas for that third spot in the Pacific. Again, could be looking at a Oilers-Kings matchup for a third straight year in the playoffs. The Kings, though, with those 72 points, are the number one wildcard team in the NHL. They are tied with Nashville in points with 72, but the Predators do have a couple of games that they played more than the Kings. The Kings have a couple of games in hand on Nashville. That said, the Predators are red hot right now. They are riding an 8-game winning streak. They're hosting Montreal tonight, which is a very winnable game for them. I would not be surprised in the least to see Nashville extend that winning streak to 9 games in a row. And if they win tonight, which I think is likely, and the Kings don't win or lose in overtime or shootout to Vancouver, then Nashville would take over the number one wildcard spot for the moment. St. Louis Blues have 67 points, so they're the first team on the outside looking in at a playoff spot in the Western Conference. Now, they did gain a little bit of ground on the Kings and Predators last night. They picked up a 2-1 shootout win over Philadelphia. So 2 more points for St. Louis. But again, right now, 5 points back of both Nashville and LA for a wild card spot in the West. The Blues are in action tonight. They're playing in New York against the Islanders. You've got Calgary and Seattle both with 65 points. The Flames have won 5 in a row. Actually, that was actually snapped last night. I stand corrected. They lost to Seattle 6-2. So the 5-game winning streak for Calgary comes to an end, and the Kraken gained some points, pulling into a tie with Calgary with 85 points. Seattle will be in action tonight, taking on the Winnipeg Jets. Now, if the playoffs started today, and this could, again, it's been kind of the same matchup for a while, but this could really change on a night-to-night basis for the LA Kings. But right now, the Kings, again, number one wildcard team in the West. They would face the Central Division's top team in the first round. That would be, right now, the Winnipeg Jets. But Dallas is tied in points with Winnipeg. They both have 83. Right now, the Jets have the tiebreaker, but that could change as soon as tonight. Both of them are in action. Stars playing in San Jose against the Sharks. Very winnable game for Dallas. So we will see if that changes. But right now, Kings versus Jets in the first round of the playoffs. One final Kings rain note. Veteran goalie Aaron Dell, we talked about him on yesterday's show, signed a 1-year deal with the LA Kings. Now, apparently he had to clear waivers to be assigned to the AHL, even though he was already playing for the Ontario Reign. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but those are the formalities of roster moves in the hockey world. So the Kings signed him to that 1-year deal. He had to pass through waivers. He cleared waivers and now has officially been assigned to the Ontario Reign. So veteran goalie Aaron Dell, a guy who has NHL experience, an insurance policy in case something could happen to David Riddick as the number 2 goalie for the LA Kings. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday's show, obviously recap the Kings Canucks game from tonight. Hopefully talk about another big win for the LA Kings. Mentioned it before, but on Thursday's show, Austin Stanovich of the Hockey News, who covers the LA Kings, scheduled to stop by. We're going to talk about the potential moves for the LA Kings at the trade deadline. Also give you a quick preview of Thursday night's Kings-Senators game. Friday, we'll recap that game. We'll wrap up any Kings-related news as it pertains to the NHL trade deadline. And, of course, we'll read your emails as well with another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to send an email for that show, as always, the email address, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can always post your thoughts in the comment section. We'd love for you to stay connected with the show by following us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. And as always, Go Kings, go.